VCT Masters Shanghai is just around the corner, and it's time to go through each team and try to make an argument for if they can win it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're talking about who will win VCT Masters Shanghai. We will be looking at each and every team, talking about their chances to win, talking about where I see them in comparison to the other teams, and just overall looking at the scope of this tournament and seeing which teams have the best chance. So this is the board we have today, all three teams from each region, 12 teams total. So this is more like a standard Masters that we've had in the past, Madrid being the least amount of teams we've ever had at a Masters. So this tournament is a lot more what we're used to. So it's definitely going to be a lot different than Madrid. So we're going to be starting with talking about the teams from the Americas region, which is 100 Thieves, G2, and Leviathan. Starting with the top seed, we have 100 Thieves. Their MVP so far this year, I think, has been Cryo. He's been their best player stats-wise. He's playing both a duelist role and a smokes role on Astra, and he's honestly been pretty underrated this split. I have heard people talk about him and talking about how good he's been doing, but honestly not as much as I would have expected. He's just frying right now. I think that 100 Thieves team as a whole is really clicking at this point, and if 100 Thieves are going to win anything this year, it's going to have to be off the back of Cryo, because he is their star player. Looking at their best map, at least by their win rate, they have a 7-2 record on Bind. Attack win percentage is 58% and defense win percentage is 61%, so two very solid numbers on both sides of that map. And these stats are from the beginning of the VCT season, so it includes kickoff as well. Their last international tournament was Champions 2022, where they had that really good run after they didn't qualify for the first two tournaments of that year. Then they make that run through LCQ, then they lose to Fnatic. They did actually beat Fnatic in the start of that group stage for that tournament, but then they lost to them later. And then Sean Garris leaves the head coach position, they pick up Cryo, and then next year, it just didn't work for them. But now that this year they've been given time to really cook with Boostio and really get the team synergy going, this team is looking much better than that team that went to champs that year. So I do think 100 Thieves do have a pretty good chance. I think they're a really good team, but I don't know if I really see them winning yet. As a squad, they still don't have a lot of experience, especially at the international level. Boostio should be able to drag this team to a pretty good finish, but I don't know if I see them winning one just yet. Maybe they do well at this tournament, and then they circle back and they win champs. But out of the Americas teams, there is a pretty good argument to be made that they have the best chance. Moving on to the second Americas team, we have G2. This team was, of course, the guard roster from years past brought into this G2 organization, making one minor roster change heading into stage 1, subbing Net for Icy. And they did have pretty mixed results during the stage, but then once playoff hit, this team just clicked. They looked much better. They were just tearing apart teams that were perceived to be better than them. Just dumping on Crew in the way that they did was very impressive. And their MVP so far, I do think, has been Valen. Valen not only individually has been performing very well, he also is proving that he is one of the top duelists in the Americas, and he did drag this team to this finish. Is he as good of an IGL as, say, Boostio or Boaster? I don't know if I believe that, but if there's any time to prove it, this is the tournament to do so. Looking at their best map record-wise, now people might think that Icebox would have shown up here because they are very good on Icebox, but the record on that map has kind of been up and down this year despite some very impressive wins, and they went on a pretty good streak with it during the stage. But right now, Lotus is their best record with a 4-1 record, attack being 64% win percentage and defense 57%. The last time this roster was here, so not the organization G2, but the roster that came from the guard, the last time they were at the international stage was Reykjavik 2022. So this is a long time coming for this roster. They made it to that tournament, they went out pretty early, and then they just weren't able to recapture that magic, and then finally they were able to make it through Ascension, be on this G2 team, and now they're finally here, and this is the time to prove that this roster sticking together wasn't a mistake, that it's a roster that could actually win. Not just win in their own region, but win a tournament. This team needs to have a deep run to really prove that they can be contenders. Do I think that they have a pretty good chance to win it? I think their chances are lower than most. While they are a very talented team with some very good pieces, they are going against some absolutely heavy hitters from other regions, and it's going to be pretty difficult for this still fairly inexperienced team on the international stage to really, make something out of it. But if they can at least go on a decent run, run, show their stuff, show that they can beat teams that are perceived to be better than them, then I think it would be a success. Moving on to the last Americas team, we have Leviathan. So this is the first time since Crew at Champs last year that a Latin American team, at least, by the org, has made it to an international, the first time this year. And it looked like potentially both Crew and Leviathan were going to make it, but then that was not the case, and Leviathan knocked them out. Looking at their MVP, who else but Aspas? Aspas has dragged this team to qualify for this tournament and is going to be looking to drag this team to a grand finals. Not that the whole rest of the roster has been bad or anything, because players like Tex and Calm, they did have slow starts to the stage, but they recovered later. Aspas is definitely the straw that stirs the drink for that team. On Icebox, they have a 5-2 record. Attack win percentage is 54 and defense is 49. So you probably want that defense number to be a bit higher, but it is Icebox. As long as they can grind out wins on that map, which they have been able to do, then it isn't too big of a problem. Last time this organization was at an international tournament was at Champs 2022. They did not qualify for one last year, aside from Locken, of course, but I'm not counting that on this board. So it's going to be very interesting how this new roster, which did have a pretty slow start, but then seemed to find some synergy and have some insane performances by their top players. They didn't look as good during playoffs. They looked pretty human, to be honest. They were able to bring G2 to a 5th map, but they also lost against 100 Thieves. So that kind of leapfrogged 100 Thieves to, be that top team in Americas. A spot which looked like they pretty much had locked down. So I do think that if Aspas can perform the way he has in Americas, just on the international stage, and then the rest of his team can follow in his footsteps and really perform as good as they can, then this roster should have a deep run. They definitely have the talent to do so, but I do still question just the overall synergy and roster build of this team. Moving on to the EMEA region, starting off with the top seed, returning to the international stage is Fnatic. Now, Fnatic is a team that has definitely gone through some already pretty high ups and downs this season. They didn't qualify for Madrid, even though Boaster and some players on that team were kind of talking about it like it was a sure thing, so they fall short against Carmine Corp, who are not at this tournament. And then during the stage, honestly, a little bit mediocre, at least to their standards. They had a 3-3 record heading into playoffs. But thankfully for them, they were able to beat out tiebreakers for teams below them, and literally every single team in their group had a 3-3 record. But then they do well in playoffs. They were able to get revenge on Carmine Corp to qualify for Shanghai, then losing to Heretics and beating Foot, and then beating Heretics to get the top spot. So much like the other top spots in each region, they will get to choose their opponent once we get to playoff stage. For the MVP, I put Leo. I'm a bit surprised I'm not putting Durka or Alphair, but in terms of stats, Leo has been their best player. Not that the other players have just been mediocre or anything, but Leo has definitely been the main factor on that team. On Breeze, they have a 5-2 record. Attack is 56% and defense is 48%. So much like Leviathan, a bit mediocre on that defense side, so you're gonna probably try to wanna, build those numbers up. And it's a bit surprising to not see Lotus on here because they were the best team on that map last year, but their Lotus has not looked anywhere near the same quality as it did in previous years. And for Fnatic, I definitely am not surprised that they're here. I know some people are. There are people saying that they were washed, that they, even after that first loss to Team Heretics at the beginning of this season, people were just thinking that this team was just down and out. And I did have a little bit of that thought in my mind, but at the same time, I was like, well, they're still a good team. It's the beginning of the stage, and Heretics have been a pretty good team this season. And even after that mediocre stage, I thought, well, this team could qualify. I mean, everybody else in the group had the same record, so why can't they? And then they're here and they're top seed. So they turned it on at the right time. They found their synergy exactly when they needed to. Their last international was Champs in 2023, where they placed 4th, trying to go for that 3rd trophy in a row. They weren't able to get it done, but they still looked very good that tournament. And if they can find that same magic again, then they do have a pretty good shot. The problem is this team is definitely not as good as they were in previous years, even though they were still able to, eventually dominate in their own region to get to this point. They don't have as deep of a map pool. Their top players aren't playing as well as they have in previous years. So it's going to be a tough one if they're going to be able to get this one done. EMEA is definitely a very interesting region this year. We haven't really seen a true top team come out of this region. Not that we particularly have in, say, Americas. It looked like that was going to be Sentinels, and now they're not here. But with EMEA, it's just so up in the air with all of these teams. It's tough to see any of the 3 of them winning. But they've done it in the past. They have a lot of experience. Maybe that embarrassment early in the year is going to give this team the motivation to make it. Moving Moving on to the next team, we have Team Heretics going to their second international tournament in a row. For the MVP, I chose Benji Fishy. He has been a very, very consistently good player for this team. One big asterisk on this team for this tournament is they don't have Miniboo. He has decided to step away from the team for now. He will return for stage 2, but he will not be here for this tournament, which is a very big loss for this team, especially because now Pat Attack isn't on this roster anymore. He was here for the first part of stage 1 and the beginning of the year, but now he's not even listed as part of the roster. So do they call him back up? Do they look at a different option? I don't know what they do to replace that loss, and Miniboo has been one of the main reasons why this team has been so successful this year. He's been an incredibly consistent and very good duelist player. But players like Benji Fishy on this team hopefully will be able to cushion that loss. On Sunset, they have a 6-2 record. Attack is 52%, defense is 63%. This actually isn't their best map win percentage wise, but they are very consistent on Sunset, so I wanted to put that one down. And their last international tournament was at Madrid, where they did lose to Paper Rex to get knocked out. So for this team, you're coming in with more experience, you're probably really hungry after losing in Madrid, but you don't have one of your X Factor players. So it's definitely going to handicap this team if they're able to, get a good replacement for Miniboo. We'll see how this team ends up doing, but I don't know if they're going to get that far without Miniboo. I just don't know if I see it. Moving on to the last EMEA team, we have Foot Esports making their return to the international stage. Foot have been an interesting team in the franchise league up until this point. Last year, they were kind of a surprise good team in the EMEA league, kind of being in that 3rd, 4th spot, making it to the internationals, but not really doing a lot of damage in them, and doing so all while their players kind of had mediocre numbers. But this year, they get CNED, another Turkish player, a former world champion, and a very good duelist player. And he has been their MVP up until this point. He has performed quite well, and is part of the reason why this team turned it around after having a slow start to the year and not being able to make it to Madrid. On Icebox, they have a 4-2 record. Attack is 64%, defense is 47%, and their last international tournament they attended was Champions 2023, where they placed 7th to 8th. Foot is kind of a dark horse. They're a team that has had a bit of success in the past, but just not enough to really, show me that they're going to be contenders for this tournament. But maybe they'll be a surprise contender and go on a deep run. I think they have the talent to do it. I just don't know if they're going to be able to stand up to some of these better teams. I do think out of the 3 EMEA teams, they're probably the worst out of them, but that doesn't mean that they're super far off from the top 2 either. So we'll see how it goes for the squad. I just don't know if I see them taking this one. Moving on to the Pacific region. Now, during Madrid, I was saying stuff like, this is the Pacific region's best chance to win an international tournament. And that kind of ended up being the case. Genji did go all the way to grand finals and had a heartbreaker loss against Sentinels. Paper X did make it to top 3, but weren't able to get it done. But now that I'm looking at this tournament, I'm looking at the teams here, I'm looking at the experience levels, I'm looking at the inconsistencies in other teams, this might be a better chance for Pacific to win than Madrid was. Starting off with Paper X, who reclaimed that top spot, that top seed in the Pacific. After losing it to Genji early in the year at kickoff, they have been able to get the revenge on Genji and once again looked like a very, very good team. And that is mostly due to the return of Jane, who I don't think is their MVP, but he is not very far off. You can name at least 3 players on this team to be their MVP. But I did end up going with something because statistically, he has been the best in the entire region. The record on Sunset is a very impressive 8-2 record. Attack is 52%, defense is 62%, and their last international tournament was Madrid. This team has come so close to winning multiple international tournaments to this point. They've gone to 2 grand finals now. They've been top 3 at multiple tournaments at this point. Even Madrid, which was seen as a tournament where they did struggle, they still ended up being 3rd, and now they have Jane back. I don't think Moniet was necessarily the problem, but now that they have Jane back, it's like they never skipped a beat. So now that they have probably more experience than at least most of these other teams, they absolutely can use that experience to win this one. And with the meta being so in flux at this point, and a lot of teams just trying to, grind out wins in a very muddy way, this might be a time in the meta that Paper X thrives. It's been working for them so far. I do think out of everybody, Paper X probably have the best chance to take this tournament. Genji's very good as well, but Paper X have just found something again that they didn't have before. Now that the roster is back together again with Jane, this team looks absolutely incredibly dangerous again. And they're going to be contenders, and I do expect at least a deep run. I'm not saying I'm picking them to win. I'm just saying in terms of just looking at teams that have the best chances, I do see them as top of that list. But that does not mean you should count out Gen G, a team that has been very good as well. For their MVP, I went with Texture, and I don't think anybody's going to really disagree with me on that one. Sure, there are some other very talented players on that team, but Texture has been consistently a very talented player for them. On Lotus, they have a very impressive 10-2 record. Probably 5 of those seems like it's against Paper X. Attack is 61%, defense is 54%, and as previously mentioned, they got second at Madrid. I do see Gen G as a team that does have a very good chance at taking this tournament as well. They have some incredible talent. Now they've had that heartbreak loss against Sentinels in the grand finals at Madrid. So now that they know what it's like to lose, they know what it's like to be at an international tournament and go on a deep run, hopefully for them, they can now use that experience to their advantage and just fry at this tournament. It's not going to come to them easy. Their rivals in Paper X have looked a lot better than they did when they were able to beat them earlier in the year. This tournament is not going to come easy to any of these teams, but with the talent that Gen G has and just with overall how the roster performs as a team, they absolutely look like contenders. Moving on to the final Pacific team, we have a team that I'm kind of shocked is here. T1 is a team that going into this year, I definitely had pretty high expectations for. Not that I expected them to be the best team in the Pacific, but definitely a team that should have qualified for Madrid, but unfortunately ran into Paper X during the playoffs. And then during the regular season stage, it looked like they weren't going to make playoffs at all. They ended up having a 2-4 record, giving Detonation Gaming their only win in the VCT so far, and they only made it into playoffs because Global Esports and Bleed are both terrible teams. So they stumbled their way into playoffs, and then all of a sudden they beat Team Secret, then they beat Gen G, and then they lose to Paper X and Gen G, but they qualify for Shanghai, so it didn't matter. On Lois, it's not a great record, but it still is a positive one, 6-4, attack being 55%, defense being 52%, and the last tournament that they were able to qualify for was Champions 2023, where they placed 9th to 12th. So they've been able to make it to these international tournaments, aside from Madrid, but not really able to do a lot of damage, despite having some pretty solid talent on their team. So this team, I don't really know what to think of them because they had such mediocre numbers going into playoffs. So was that run to make it to Shanghai just a flash in the pan, or was this a team that is a lot better than their record that were able to find their footing at the right time? That question will be answered when Shanghai gets going, but I don't think I see this team winning. Moving on to the final region, we have to talk about the hometown teams, China. This is the first tournament that China will be hosting, and these 3 teams will be looking to give the home crowd something to cheer about. Starting with EDG, who find themselves in a very familiar position that they've been in before. Their MVP is Kane Kane. He's definitely the best player in all of China. He's consistently been the best player for this team and potentially one of the best players in the world. I remember his run at Tokyo last year. He looked pretty crazy. On Split, they have a 5-1 record, attack being 50%, defense being 65%, and their last tournament placement was Madrid, which was a 5th to 6th placement, which has now been their placement at most of their internationals. So for EDG, this is a big tournament. You are on home turf. You've had the same placement at each international that you've been to for quite some time. So you're looking to not only give the fans something to cheer about, but also break a curse. It's been a lot of deja vu for this team. They've been able to be really good in their own region. But when it comes to these international tournaments, they start off looking really good and potential contenders, and then they just fall short and place 5th to 6th. So we'll see if they can break this curse, if they can break that pattern, but it's going to be a tough route. But hey, if there's any tournament for a China team to win, for EDG to win, this is the one. Moving on, we have FPX Fun plus Phoenix, a team that ever since they started their Chinese Valorant roster after having a European roster in the past, have kind of just played second fiddle to EDG, a team that is good in their own region, but whenever they face EDG to kind of, try to prove that they're better than them, it just kind of falls short. Their MVP is Life, a very solid player. On Lotus, they have a 7-1 record. Attack is 71%, very good attack number there, and defense is 56%. At Madrid, they did place 7th to 8th. They did lose both of their matches. I don't think they won a map. So for FPX is going to be trying to prove that you're not just a second fiddle team to your rival in EDG. Team that can beat top teams in other regions, that show that they're not just, good in their own country. I don't know if this is the tournament that they end up doing it in. There are going to be some teams from other regions that are going to be very hungry, but if they can match that intensity, then maybe they have a chance. Finally, we have the last team we have to talk about, Dragon Ranger Gaming. Now this was the Ascension team in the China region, so the team that came up through the Ascension process. But when you compare how Ascension worked in the Chinese league as opposed to other regions, it is definitely different. China didn't have their own version of the VCT last year. They just had a bunch of tournaments that qualified some of these teams for internationals, but then they announced their franchise league and they had the teams that they put in it, and then other teams had to fight it out. So it wasn't at the same, skill differential that, say, the Americas or the EMEA Ascension was. But hey, we have 2 Ascension teams in this tournament. We have G2 and Dragon Rangers, so hey, that maybe it proves that the Ascension process works. For their MVP, I honestly don't know a lot about this team, but Vokashu does have some pretty solid stats. He is a player from Russia, so we have 2 Russian players on this board, something being, the second one. On Icebox, they have a 4-1 record, pretty good there, attack being 56% and defense being 52%, and they have not been to an official VCT Tier 1 event so far. So this is their chance to prove that China is more than just a one-team region. EDG and FPX have been just the 2 de facto top 2 in that region that have been able to make it to the internationals but underperform. So maybe Dragon Ranger can beat that pattern and prove that there is more talent to be had in the China region. But with the lack of experience at this level, I do question whether or not this team can go on a run. But as I admitted, I don't know a ton about this team, so we'll see. So those are all the teams that we have to talk about. Let me know who you think is going to win the VCT Masters Shanghai tournament. I will be doing a pick'ems video at some point before the tournament starts, so look out for that one. And I'm not choosing an official prediction as my winner yet, so stay tuned for the other videos that will be about that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Please click like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.